Hi, I'm Carly Corbett-Burns, Senior Associate in the Sydney Labour and Employment Team. Today I'll be talking about a recent Fair Work Commission case dealing with the age-old question of contractor versus employee. Following the two major High Court rulings dealing with this question, the Fair Work Commission has confirmed that the previous test used by the Commission has been modified, if not replaced. Deputy President Anderson summarised that the High Court has determined that contractual terms and not performance, where those terms can be ascertained and where the contract is not a sham, will determine the true nature of the relationship, although how the worker performs duties in practice could be relevant for certain limited purposes, such as to find contractual terms where they cannot otherwise be ascertained, or to determine the nature of any variation to agreed terms. This new test was put into action in the case of Waring v Hague Retail from last month, where ultimately a worker was found not to be an employee and therefore not entitled to unfair dismissal protections. Hague Retail is a manufacturer of baked goods, and Mr. Waring is a pastry chef. Hague Retail entered into an agreement with Mr. Waring whereby a new business entity would be created and Mr. Waring would be employed by this joint venture to bake products to supply to Starbucks, the prospective client of the joint venture. Unfortunately, Starbucks were never won over as a client. But Mr. Waring had commenced work after the joint venture agreement was entered, including using his network to try and secure an agreement with Starbucks, but also manufacturing samples for Starbucks, as well as goods to be sold in Mr. Hague's bakeries. And this went on for 18 months. The new test required the Commission to look to the terms of the agreement, but in this case, the agreement failed to specify the nature of the relationship in this 18-month interim period. Deputy President Anderson summarised the relevant task as one to make an evaluative judgment, giving primacy to the terms of the contract under which work is performed. In doing this, he reached the conclusion that Mr. Waring was not an employee under the agreement. Relevant factors were the terms of the agreement reflected a business arrangement, referring to Mr. Hague as the buyer and Mr. Waring as the seller. Also, the agreement had multiple parties, whereas an employment agreement will generally only be between the employer and the employee. And the agreement was conditional upon a wholesale contract for the supply of goods and two legal entities being created through the joint venture. And crucially, there was a reference to Mr. Waring starting employment, but that was specified to start at the commencement of the first contract order, which never materialised. So he was not an employee under the written agreement, and in the absence of any other express agreement dealing with the interim work of Mr. Waring, this was one of the rare cases contemplated by the High Court where how the relationship worked in practice was relevant in order to find the contractual terms that cannot otherwise be ascertained. Looking at the relationship in practice, Deputy President Anderson found Mr. Waring's work aligned to his ambition to enter a joint venture with Mr. Hague and strongly indicated a contractor relationship. So he was found not to be an employee, and that's all from me today. Thank you for listening, and we hope you can tune in for our next Workplace Wednesday.